In April of last year, my boyfriend and I were walking home from our friend's house. I had just finished my first year at college and we wanted to go out and celebrate and have some fun. We live in a rural town and our friend lived on the far side of it, so our walk was about half an hour or so. I had a drink or two and smoked some of the joint they had rolled, and smoking makes me paranoid and this night was no different. Anyway, we left at maybe 10 or 11 p.m. and everything was perfectly normal until we got to the end of the long street that would eventually lead to my house. This street always felt so long to walk. Like hours can pass and you can barely make a dent in the amount of steps made. The street we turned on to this road was maybe 10 blocks from my house. A few minutes after we turned onto the road, I felt something was off. But my boyfriend said that I was stoned and reminded me that I'm a pretty paranoid person to begin with. I really am. This white pickup truck that was parked in front of some house turns on and begins to drive slowly away, and would then park. I watched it to see if it was just me being paranoid or not, but it proceeded to stop a couple houses down and sat there with the car still on. As soon as we get close, it would drive away, parking a little further away. This continued until we got to the end of my street. At this point, I kept telling my boyfriend that I'm not paranoid and that this truck was messing with us, and he had gone quiet. A couple houses down from mine, this truck drives to the end of the street. My house on the corner. There's a dead end right by my house because we live near a river. It stops for a moment at the dead end and proceeds to turn on their high beams and begin to slowly drive towards us. My boyfriend sticks his arm out in front of me, stopping me from walking any further as this truck continues to approach. My house is so close yet so far. This truck slowly drives by us. The windows are tinted, but we can see two silhouettes. And because they had blinded us, we didn't think to look at the license plates, or even the model of the truck. I swear I felt like that was the night I was going to die, or worse. My thoughts hurled around in my mind, and I could see that my boyfriend was in the same mindset. My boyfriend, being pretty quick on his feet, waited until the truck disappeared from sight and took my hand before racing to the house and locking the door. He had thought about turning down one of the other streets so we could try to lose him, but he figured that he'd wait until they were out of sight and then book it to the house so that they couldn't see which house we went in. We looked out one of the front windows very carefully and saw this truck come back into view and began to drive around the block, presumably looking for us. This went on for 10 minutes. I called the police to inform them that we had been followed, but without the license plates or model, they could only keep their eyes open for suspicious white trucks. I was adamant that these people had to know one of us, if not me, because they drove until they were beside my house. Whether they actually knew it was my house or not, I don't know. My boyfriend tries to insist that it was probably a bunch of kids trying to mess with us, but I don't believe that. A few days later, we heard that someone was picked up and was last seen in a white truck. Since this night, there have been many stories in the paper and online that people have been grabbing other people, and these people were trafficked in the area. I'm still seeing reports even today, which prompted this unsettling memory. It makes me wonder if they were some of these people, and if they were they after both of us, or just one of us? Or were they truly just a bunch of jerks trying to mess around with us? Either way, I don't care to know. But whenever I see a white truck, I become on edge. It may be silly, but the events of that night are still fresh in my mind.
It was nighttime and I was playing Fortnite. I was playing Battle Lab where you spawn into the original map but there aren't any other players or you couldn't fight friends. My parents had gone to Wendy's to get some supper. They left me by myself so I just kept playing. I kept on seeing a lot of loot llamas and every time I opened one another one would spawn nearby. It was getting really weird and then I found this little cave and it had the last loot llama and then I saw a dead person lying in the cave. And and there was a sign that said, "You're next." Then my screen went pitch black, and 5 seconds later I heard a knock on my front door. I peeped out the window and there was no one there. I thought it was my parents, but they hadn't come home yet. I couldn't play Fortnite for the next 5 days because the experience kind of traumatized me. I can't even imagine what would have happened if I had went outside.
Workway is an organization that enables people to volunteer aboard to help others in need in exchange for food and shelter. Most often than not, people on Workway decide to help others aboard to travel to exotic places. And people that hire Workway volunteers are often families, couples, or elderly people that are too busy for basic chores and therefore decide to shelter Workway volunteers to take care of these basic chores. This means that complete strangers, aka the Workway volunteer and the host or hosts, will be living together for an extended period of time. This is where things can be sought. For context, I'm 18 and this happened to me just a couple months ago. It was my first time doing Workway, and after 2 days trying it out, I'm 100% sure I don't want to do it over again. It was one of the most traumatizing events of my life that I'll remember till the day I die. Also, I'm a female, and for context's sake, I've always received compliments on my body ever since I hit puberty, so I would say I'm definitely on the attractive side. Not to say it's always been rainbows and sunshines for me on an emotional level. One day, while browsing on Workway, I received a direct message from an offer of an elderly couple that needed help with gardening chores. The account that messaged me had its first name set as Enzo, so I assumed he was the husband that was hiring the Workway volunteers. Upon inspecting his profile picture though, I realized it was a selfie of him with a much younger woman, maybe in her early 20s. She wasn't even smiling and it didn't look like she was even acknowledging that she was in the guy's selfie. I don't think too much of it and read their description. Couple looking for some gardening help. Very beautiful view on the ocean. Looking for young and strong Workways for help. Don't forget that swimsuit. The smiley face made it a little creepy, but I probably thought the guy was old and just trying to be funny. They had pictures of the house that seemed like a charming one with a pool and a nice view on the beach. It looked like paradise and it had a pretty good rating, so I accepted. All of it was in the south of Italy and looked to be overall a really nice place to stay. All in all, I was pretty excited. Fast forward and I arrive at the place. It's kind of like in the pictures, except that the garden totally run down, as if someone had destroyed it. I get introduced to Enzo first. He's poorly dressed and I immediately notice he's a little socially awkward. But I think that's just because he can barely express himself in English. I ask him where his wife is, to which he responds that she died about a week ago because of cancer. On the spot, I'm immediately heartbroken and give him my condolences, though I'm a little skeptic because you don't just die of cancer in your 20s. Maybe they broke up and he just didn't want to admit it. He was definitely lying about something. As I'm saying I'm sorry for his loss, he looks down as if he were crying, so I awkwardly, not really out of sympathy, decide to give him a hug. While we were hugging though, I noticed his hands are a little down my back, barely touching my butt. I was wearing a sundress, so I really felt it. But I didn't think too much of it and just brushed it off because he was old and rather short. But this is the first red flag for me. We go inside and he starts showing me around the house. He keeps telling me that there is a pool in the garden if I want to swim. He tells me this about 3 times and it's getting on my nerves. He shows me my room and it's a big room with a view on the backyard pool and the beach. He has showed me his room which had the same view. Once in my room though, he also mentions that there is mice in the attic above my room that sometimes make noise at night. So I tell him, oh really? And he doesn't answer. I awkwardly look out the window, and after a long awkward pause of me looking outside the window and turning back to him to compliment the view, he leaves my room without saying anything. I thought he maybe didn't hear me. Fast forward to the next day, and I'm working on the garden, cutting bushes and watering the plants, while he's out on the porch behind me, laying down and taking a nap. Or I thought so. It was pretty hot that day, so I was just wearing a bikini and a baggy old shirt on top. While I'm bending over to water some smaller plants in the back, I can't help but notice his eyes are open, looking right at me. I'm not that sure he was watching me though, so I decide to go water the plants next to him and pretend I think he's sleeping. I bend over and pretend I'm packing up something from the soil. I'm aware that my breasts are more or less half exposed through the baggy shirt I was wearing. I quickly glance in his direction and see that his old eyes wide open looked on my breasts. A little disgusted, I stand up and walk towards the side of the house where he can't see me. A couple moments after that, he goes back inside. I start to get a little suspicious about this guy, but I couldn't really blame him. After all, his wife was dead or broken up, and it wasn't the first time a guy has looked at me like that. I take this as a second red flag though. On the second day, Enzo had given me permission to take the day off, so I decided to wander off to the beach. It was fun and especially beautiful, but it was a little too sunny, so I decided to go back in the backyard near the pool and under the shade of the trees. When I came back, Enzo was walking towards me with swimming goggles in his hand, and suddenly tells me that there is a small rocks in the pool that I should pick up because he's too old to go that deep in the water. That's when I thought he was a little odd. Firstly, who has small rocks not so randomly scattered in their pool floor? And second, who owns a pool and doesn't he have a perch to get small leaves and insects out of the water? But put on the spot, I decided to do the job. I was also already in my swimsuit, so why should I not do it? I put on the goggles, go inside the water and pick up the rocks. While I'm doing this, he's standing there just watching me do it. In the water, I faintly heard the iPhone's recording sound, and while going back up out of the water after picking up the last rock though, I noticed him on his iPhone for the first time. He was holding it in the water with both hands as if he was zooming it on me. It was just too obvious. I tell him I'm done and ask him if that's his phone. He replies that he's using it to zoom in the water because it's waterproof and he can use it to see the rocks in the water. I told him it was a great idea, though I didn't believe it one bit. This is the third red flag, and right then and there I make up my mind to leave early because I don't feel safe with this guy. I ask him for a towel since I forgot one, and he quickly jerks away to get one in the house. While I look at the sea in front of me, I wait for a good 5 minutes before he hands me a towel. That's when I suspected he was most likely watching me from the upstairs window before actually getting a towel. I dry myself off and get to my room to take a nap because I was exhausted. Once in my room though, I look for possible hidden cameras because I started to doubt Enzo. Fortunately, I found nothing, so I locked my door, took a shower and went to sleep. I wake up at around 7 and for some reason I can't find Enzo anywhere in the house. It's dinner time, so I just decide to start cooking. I call him out for dinner and he finally shows up. I ask him where he was, to which he responds that he was in his room. Again, this was a complete lie since I walked past his empty room several occasions. We had dinner and he kept telling me how good it was. I kept telling him with everything that's left in me that I was flattered, to which he responds back with an old creepy smile. That night he had some trouble falling asleep. I had obviously locked my door and it felt safe, but it was an unusually hot summer night. Before coming here, I had this habit of sleeping naked that I stopped doing once I came here for obvious reasons. I opened the windows to get some fresh air, but it still didn't help. So I subsided to old habits and decided to take off my pajamas to sleep naked. I instantly fall asleep after that. I woke at around 3 am to some noise coming from the ceiling. It was like faint old wood cracking. I opened my eyes and looked at the ceiling above me. That's when, in the dark between the planks, I faintly see a set of eyes looking at me. I lock eye contact with Enzo, who is in the fucking attic and get in full panic mode because I'm paralyzed with fear, so I don't move. I pretend I'm looking at the left side of the ceiling and then close my eyes. My breasts are completely exposed to this creep, so I decided to turn to my side and move up the blanket to cover up. For the rest of the night, I'm too scared to open my eyes or move, so I just stay there paralyzed in fear until some sunlight reaches me. Morning came and I was more than ready to just get out of this hell house. When it was about 6 in the morning, I packed my stuff and left the house running. I waited at the train station to get to the nearest airport. Thank God I came out unarmed. The guy was a twisted and seriously sick fucking pervert.
Hi everyone, I finally decided to post what happened to me 4 years ago. At that time I was 17 years old and was living for a few years in a small house with my mom after my parents divorced 6 years before. The house wasn't huge, but we had one floor with our bedrooms and a small garden. We also have a dog who isn't really scary. It's one of those small dogs with a lot of hair. His biggest default is that he barks a lot during the day every time someone is close to the garden. That annoyed me and my neighbors a lot. It's important to note that my dog never barks at night and always sleeps in my bed with me. Anyway, one night in the middle of the night, I had a dream where I heard a constant dog barking. In my dream, I felt like it lasted 1,000 years, but I think it only lasted for a few seconds. I woke up, and I didn't feel the weight of my dog on my feet. I felt like something was wrong, and then I realized my dog was actually barking and growling. I didn't understand what was happening. I just looked for my dog and saw him on top of the stairs, his head turned towards the front door. I jumped out of my bed and rushed to the top of the stairs where my dog was. There was a shadow of a man standing just at the bottom of the stairs next to the front door. I wasn't even able to shout. I just took my dog in my arms by reflex and ran towards my mom's room. My mom was just waking up. She takes medication to sleep, so it's very hard to wake her up. Thank God the door to her bedroom can be locked with a key. Even though I was shaking like hell, I locked the door. My mom understood what was happening when we heard footsteps coming from the stairs. We froze in a corner of her bedroom and she grabbed her phone to call the police. While we were trying to reach the cops, the guy started shaking the door handle and then punching the door. After a moment, he stopped and he psycho laughed. That's when my mom had a good idea of shouting, "I called the police, get out." After a moment, we heard him going down the stairs, still laughing. We didn't dare to move until we heard the police officers. When they arrived, no one was there. In the living room on the table, there was a note that wrote, "See you soon." That's how I translated it because the original note is in French. They said later that apparently the guy got in and out by my garage, which has a back door at the time we always left opened. Immediately after that, we went living with my grandparents for a while and moved out in a new house a couple months later. We never heard of this guy again, but we always check to make sure the doors are locked before going to bed, and I've had trouble falling asleep ever since. For almost a year after that, I waited until it was 4 a.m. to go to sleep just to be sure he didn't find us and try to sneak into our home again.